Wilson takes a snapshot of the defense. Here they come on 3rd and 5. Wilson, boy, somehow escapes. He's going to run for it. First down, Jets. Wilson, plenty of green grass. Wilson stays in bounds. He's still going. And he's in. Touchdown. Zach Wilson pulling a magic trick.
First signature play for Zach Wilson in his career so far with New York. Jacksonville brings a blitz. They should have had him. He ducks, he gets out of it, makes a good play, and then stays aggressive. Could have gone out of bounds right there. Decides to cut back, and what an awesome play.
All right, we are back here on the Just and the Suffering podcast. That call you guys heard, courtesy of CBS Sports' Spiro Diaz and Adam Archuleta. The Zach Wilson 50-yard touchdown run against the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. Join me today for Jets Week on the podcast. The editor of the Jet Press over at Fansided, Justin Freeze here. Justin, how are you?
What's going on, man? How you doing? I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Thanks for coming on here. I got to say, it's been a very interesting offseason with the Jets here. I mean, they had a lot of cap space, a lot of picks. They did a lot of things offseason. I feel like they got a lot of work done. I feel like it's a big expectation increase on them this year.
Absolutely. I think this has been a very successful offseason for the Jets. They've kind of built the roster in exactly the way that they should have, and there's a lot of optimism. Of course, with the Jets, it's always cautious optimism. You never want to be too optimistic about the team, but I think that there are plenty of logistical reasons to look at this roster and say, hey, if Zach Wilson takes that step, they can compete this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, I think the number one question for the Jets right now is how Zach Wilson is going to look this year. And I feel like it's been up and down camp from what I've been seeing here, where some days he looks great, some days he's struggling. The line's had some issues in there, but what have you seen so far about Zach Wilson? What do you think here? You think we give more time? You worried yet? And what are your signs about Zach?
I think overall it's been a good camp. I think he's shown progress throughout the summer, and he's strung together more good days than bad days, and that's really all you're looking for from a young quarterback. At this stage of his career. Ultimately, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how he's going to play this year, but there's the excuses are limited. Even with the Mekhi Becton injury, of course, they went out and they just signed Dwayne Brown on the day that we're recording this. So there's few excuses for him. He has a good offensive line on paper. He has a skill position group that is very much respectable. The defense is significantly improved. There are very few excuses for him not to take a step forward this year. Will he do it? I don't know. I think we've seen progress throughout training camp, which is encouraging. And I think his second year in the system should provide, it should be advantageous for him. It should be good for Mike LaFleur having another, a year under his belt as a play caller, which should only serve to benefit Zach Wilson too. So I'd like to believe that he can take that step. Will it be the step forward that Jets fans want to see? I'm not sure, but I'm confident in saying I think he'll be better this year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like compared to what they did with Sam Darnold, which is an absolute disaster, they've done much better with Wilson. They gave him pretty much everything you could ask for. They gave him lines, they gave him a creative play caller, they got weapons here. So, barring another rash of injuries that takes everything away from him, you can really say that the Jets in 2022, if they do not succeed, is really on Zach Wilson at that point.
Yeah, they've done exactly the opposite of what they did with Sam Darnold. And with Darnold, every year that went on, they kind of stripped away more of his roster from around him and put him in a worse situation to succeed in every year. So they've done the exact opposite now with Zach Wilson, where the roster had plenty of holes last year. On top of that, they got hit with a rash of injuries. They were the second most injured team in the NFL, behind only the Baltimore Ravens. And it really took a toll, because when you have a young team like the Jets, a young rebuilding team, it's hard to build depth. And unfortunately, they didn't have a lot of depth last year. Joe Douglas changed that this offseason. They went out and they got not only good starters at a lot of important positions, but they have depth at pretty much every position on the team right now, maybe with the exception of offensive tackle, and maybe you could point to defensive tackle, but they have depth. They have depth to survive injuries. But they have that depth, and like you said, the excuses are kind of gone for Zach Wilson now. So we'll see what happens this year.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously the story of camp this week is the Mekhi Becton injury. He fractures his kneecap on a freak injury. He's out for the season. They bring in Dwayne Brown on the day like I mentioned earlier here. I think it's a very important sign for them, because the offensive line has been getting better, and the Laken Tomlinson move in the offseason was definitely a big help. But now you brought in 2 Pro Bowlers with Dwayne Brown here. I feel like this line has a chance to be very, very, very good.
Absolutely. I mean, if they all live up to expectations, if they play to the level that the Jets believe they can, and then that we believe they can, there's no reason the Jets offensive line shouldn't be a borderline top 10 unit, if not better, because they already were around league average last year. They were an average to some metrics, even had an above average offensive line last year, and that was with a hole at right guard. Even when Duvernay Tardif took over for Greg Van Roten, it was still a hole at right guard, and it's still a weakness. Now you bring in Laken Tomlinson to play left guard. You're moving Elijah Vera Tucker to right guard. Of course, the question mark for the last few days has been right tackle. They're bringing in Dwayne Brown, and it's not confirmed, but the assumption is that means George Fant moves to right tackle. We'll see if that's confirmed by the time, people are listening to this. But, either way, now you have 5 starters along an offensive line who have played at an average, if not better, level in their careers and are coming off good seasons. All 5 of them are coming off productive seasons. And I think especially with Elijah Vera Tucker, the Jets really expect him to take that step. He was fine last year. He had some rookie, rough patches, which is to be expected, but they really believe that he can be a Pro Bowl guard. And I think they're hoping to see a step from him. That offensive line looks good on paper. It looks very good.
It does. It also looks good to see Wilson left on paper. Going back to Sam Darnold, remember there were games throwing to some combination of like Andre Roberts, Deontay Burnett, like a very uninspiring group of receivers. Now he's got Jack Wilson has a bunch of good receivers. So the number 1 pick, Garrett Wilson. They have Corey Davis. They have a good tight end room for once with Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzama leading the way. They have a deep running back stable here. I feel like for once the Jets actually have playmakers.
Absolutely. They have completely revamped that skill position group over the last 2 years. They brought in Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis as your top 3 wideouts. That's a very strong, trio of wide receivers at the top of that depth chart. The hope is that Elijah Moore can be that number 1 guy going forward. We saw flashes of it last year for like a 6-week period or whatever it was. He was statistically one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and then unfortunately, he got hurt. But they're really excited to see what he can do, especially entering his second year in this system, a system that is notoriously difficult for young wide receivers to pick up. Which is why with someone like Garrett Wilson, you might see him take a little bit of time to adjust to the NFL, to adjust to the system. But either way, you have your 4 deep at wide receiver if you throw in Braxton Berrios. You're 3 deep at tight end because, assuming that Jeremy Ruckert can do something, can provide something as a rookie. I'm very impressed with what Tyler Conklin has been able to do this spring and this summer. And I think he's going to have a big role in the offense. And then you throw in a guy like Breece Hall who can catch out of the backfield. They have a lot of talent in that skill position group. And that's, it's only going to serve to benefit Zach Wilson going forward.
Yeah, I remember in years past, a lot of times is you would never take a Jet in your fantasy draft because they were always end up killing your team. But now there's I feel like a lot of options you could take that you actually feel comfortable with.
Right. I think it's funny because it's almost the opposite effect now. It's like, oh, I'm not sure I want to take a Jet because they're going to spread the ball around so much. It's like they have too many options almost. So I'd love to draft a guy like Corey Davis, but realistically, he might be the 3rd or 4th option in that offense. So it's hard to even put too much stock maybe into anybody but Elijah Moore or Breece Hall. I guess Breece Hall will get his touches. I think that's someone you could safely put a lot of fantasy stock into. But it's difficult. There's so many options, like you said.
Yeah, the one I would put my hat on here is if you're punting tight end, Tyler Conklin. I think considering he's had a huge connection with Wilson throughout camp and throughout the offseason, I feel like he's a guy that's going to explode this year.
Absolutely, and I definitely think that he's going to emerge as that top tight end. I think when the Jets signed Uzama and Conklin, a lot of people assumed Uzama was going to be the guy. He had more experience as a starter. I believe they gave him a smidge more money, so a lot of people were kind of thinking Uzama was the guy. But Conklin has kind of made it very clear quickly that he is not only going to be probably the top tight end in New York, but he is going to be one of Zach Wilson's top targets. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished as the Jets' second leading receiver behind say Elijah Moore. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take a look here at some of these rookies coming in here because the Jets had a huge draft. They had the 2 first-round picks to begin with in the top 10. They traded into the first round for Jermaine Johnson. Breece Hall's gotten a lot of rave reviews here. So in terms of the rookies here, who do you think is the most exciting one thus far?
Oh, man. I think it's tough. There's so many picks there, man. I think Breece Hall is going to show the most excitement and explosiveness as a rookie. I think that, he's playing a position where it's not uncommon at all to see players, at that position, to see running backs kind of take the NFL by storm. And if he gets his looks, if he gets his snaps, and the offense around him is at least capable, I think that he is going to be primed for a big, big season.
Yeah, for sure. I go to the defensive side of the ball for a bit here, especially, defensive line. Getting Jermaine Johnson in the draft was good. The Jets also quietly built some depth into that defensive line. Getting Carl Lawson back is going to help. They brought in Michael Clemens. They brought in Solomon Thomas. They have a lot of buys in that line, right? I'm reading some articles here, and there are guys that Jets could cut. I feel like our teams are actually going to pick up and be useful players because they have a lot of depth on the defensive line.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that the defensive line is the deepest position group on the team, and Robert Saleh wouldn't have it any other way, right? That's his philosophy: is you can never have too many edge rushers, and the Jets certainly employed that philosophy this offseason. On top of returning Carl Lawson, you still have John Franklin Myers, who will play plenty on the edge, especially on early downs. And then you get Tremaine Johnson, who you trade up for. You got Bryce Huff, Vinny Curry, Michael Clemens, Jacob Martin. Like the list goes on. They're legitimately 6-7 deep at defensive end, which is crazy because not all those guys are going to make the roster. Even someone like Jabari Zuniga is having a very productive training camp, and he's probably not going to make the team, which is a shame. But they have so many players there; they have so much depth. I wouldn't be surprised if they flipped one of those guys maybe for a late round pick at some point, because they have so much depth there.
Yeah, it's also, I think the biggest transformation on this team was then besides the skill position was the cornerback, was the secondary, because last year they lost Marcus May midway through the season. They decided not to go at a veteran corner, give all the young kids reps. They bring in DJ Reed. They draft Sauce Gardner to be basically their two starting corners. They bring in Jordan Whitehead to play safety with LaMarcus Joyner. I mean, the secondary has made a dramatic improvement as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, the Sauce Gardner pick is I think Sauce Gardner is going to be the best Jets quarterback and first cornerback since Darrelle Revis, which is not exactly a hot take, but I truly believe in him as a prospect. I think he's an exceptional prospect. And then DJ Reed you're bringing. It was one of my favorite free agent signings. It was a very, very underrated signing. I think it kind of got overlooked around the NFL, but he was very good last year. And then now Bryce Hall is essentially relegated to a backup role, where Bryce Hall is probably starting on a third of the rosters in the NFL. And that's saying a lot that he's now your number 4 corner essentially, because he's not in the slot. And then Jordan Whitehead is the guy I know the Jets are so excited about, not only from an on-field standpoint, his performance, but they love his mentality. They love that kind of alpha mentality that he brings on and off the field. He's a leader, and they were very surprised that Tampa just let him walk, and they were able to get him for as cheap as they did. So I know the Jets are super excited about Jordan Whitehead, and I think he's someone that's going to become a fan favorite rather quickly.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed as we go into these conversations here is just the fact that we talk about it again, is the amount of depth they have, because this is a team that in the past 4 or 5 years where their starting lineup looks like okay, and then a bunch of guys get hurt, and you have guys who shouldn't be in the NFL basically getting meaningful reps with them. Now you have guys who could start on other teams potentially as backups here, which is the form we want to start building when you're trying to build a winning organization.
Yeah, it's impressive how much depth that they've been able to build at so many different positions, like defensive end, corner, even I'd say the interior offensive line. They got a couple of guys there, like Dan Feeney's a fine backup. Nate Herbig is a good backup. That was a good pickup in the offseason. They have 3 tight ends that they're confident in. Running back room's pretty deep. They have depth at almost every single position, and that's so crucial in today's NFL, where we saw last year the impact that injuries could have, and the fact that they have been able to build that depth means that they are protected in case the inevitable happens and injuries happen. We've already seen it with Mekhi Becton. That's already one injury. There's bound to be more. So they're protected. They protected themselves. They've gone and built out that depth, and that's one of the most important things they've done this offseason.
It also would not be Jet camp over the last 4 or 5 years. If we were talking about the kicking game here, because ever since they let Jason Myers go, it's been revolving door position. This year, it's Eddie Pinheiro came on late last year, made some good kicks down the stretch against Greg Zuerlein. He's known for his big leg here. How do you think this battle ends up breaking out here? Who do you think ends up being the kicker on opening day, or is that guy not here yet?
I think it'll be Greg Zuerlein. From what everything that's been reported early on, it seems like he has the edge. I think they're just more likely to lean to him because he does have a bigger leg. And if we've seen kind of how they value that. They value that with Matt Amendola, and I think they'll value that with Greg Zuerlein, especially since he's more of a proven commodity. He has more experience in the NFL. He's been at one time was one of the best kickers in the league. So as long as he doesn't kind of just come out and completely, just self-destruct, I do think he'll be the guy. But it really just does come down to preseason. If Pinheiro makes all his kicks and Zuerlein is inconsistent, then Pinheiro probably wins the job. But if I'm saying right now who I think it'll be, my money would be, I think the edge goes to Greg Zuerlein.
Yeah, and Jet fans also know the last time the Jets took a cast-off kicker from the Cowboys, ended up working out pretty well for them. Nick Folk was here about a decade.
Yeah, that's true. If you could, forget Brett Maher, for a second, but
yeah, you could forget about that here. And I think also one thing I was keeping in mind, he's obviously in training camp. You're always looking to see, where are position battles, where are the standouts here. I think the standout category is interesting for the Jets. I mean, it seems like they have a lot of guys who are popping at campus here. There's a lot of rave reviews of some of the beat guys who are out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think some, people like a Jason Pinnock is a guy to keep an eye on. He was playing very well in the spring. And I think that, I'm not sure if he's going to be the guy this year, I do think LaMarcus Joyner still holds on to that free safety role, but I know the Jets love Pinnock, and they'd love to see him take on that role. Potentially, he could be your starting free safety in 2023. That's somebody to keep an eye on. Some really under the radar guys. I was at the green and white scrimmage, and I think a guy that popped to me was Calvin Jackson, undrafted free agent. He was interesting because they didn't even sign him originally as an undrafted free agent. He was one of the two players that they signed after minicamp, or at rookie minicamp, as just a tryout basis. They brought him in. He has some experience as a returner. He was very productive in that green and white scrimmage game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he pushes for one of those final roster spots. I'm not sure he gets it, but I think he could sneak his way at least onto the practice squad.
Yeah, if you watch Last Chance U on Netflix, that's the same guy, that Calvin Jackson. So it'll be fun to see how he does in the preseason.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that he's somebody that can make an impact. Maybe somebody like an Herb Charles. I know people love the undrafted guys and keeping an eye on Bam Knight. The running back out of NC State is another dude who I think he'll make the practice squad at least. There's some fun guys down there, kind of towards the bottom of the roster. But I think the Jets are so deep this year that a lot of those guys just aren't going to make the team. Like, you're realistically looking at, we talked about it before. Somebody like Vinny Curry is right now probably on the outside looking in, which is crazy to say, but it just shows how deep that the Jets are at most positions.
Yeah, that's what I think is interesting with them, because I feel like, unlike a lot of years where you're like, oh, we're battling to see who the quarterback is or who's going to be the starting left tackle, I feel like you're looking now at the battles, or like, who's going to make the end of the roster? Like, who's going to be the fifth receiver between Jeff Smith or Denzel Mims, or like who's going to be the fifth defensive end that they're going to carry, and two other guys are going to get cut or trade. I feel like that's the stuff you're really watching in the camp battlefront.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's very few legitimate position battles going on for the starting job right now for the Jets. So you have obviously a kicker. We talked about it already. In theory, there's a cornerback. There's a battle with Sauce Gardner and Bryce Hall, but Sauce Gardner is going to win it. In theory, there's one at tight end, but it seems very likely that Tyler Conklin wins it. There's very few that I can think of off the top of my head that are really like actual position battles where you don't know who the starter is going to be. I think that says a lot about the current positioning of the roster, because generally the worse the team is, the more unsure and uncertain certain position groups are. So it's very promising to see that most of the Jets starting lineup is pretty much set in stone.
Yeah, and I was this preseason important then, because they come out of the regular season, like, they got sort of the opposite what the Giants got, where they got all their easy games late, and NFL sort of load up the schedule. A lot of the hard games, like weeks 1 to 9, they basically played through the AFC North the first 4 weeks. They got a lot of Buffalo, Green Bay, etc. early on in the season here. Like, looking at that schedule here, like, what do you think like they have to do to sort of get through that and say, okay, like, we get the second half, our schedule lightens up, we have a chance to make a run here and get ourselves into the wild card hunt?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about surviving that first half of the season, kind of, because it's a pretty brutal half. Obviously, you start off playing the entire AFC North, and you get the Dolphins there, the Packers, Broncos. It's a tough schedule. Really, up until that Patriots, maybe the second Patriots game, the Bears game, it's a very, very difficult schedule. And you're realistically looking at, if the Jets don't live up to expectations, if they kind of fall short, like they're realistically looking at like a 1-7, 2-6 start. Like, that's absolutely on the table, and they can't have that. Like, they need to avoid that. So I know it's tough with a young team, but you kind of really got to hit the ground running. You got to come out week 1, put on a competitive showing against Baltimore. I'm not saying you have to win, but you can't get blown out by 2-3 scores. Like, you just can't have that happen. And you have to steal a couple of games from teams you're supposed to lose to. I know Jets fans will circle the game against the Browns, even the Steelers, and they'll be like, these are winnable games. They're still going to be underdogs in those games, even if it's Jacoby Brissett starting, or they're going to be underdogs in those games. So the winnable games, the games where they're still underdogs, but they have a fighting chance, they need to steal those games, and they need to show that they can compete with the better teams.
Yeah, I think the Jets hit their hand too when they brought Dwayne Brown in as the guy to replace Mekhi Becton, because you don't bring in a 36-year-old left tackle if you look like to just steadily build. Like, they really legitimately think they can have a shot this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about that, and it's also about protecting Zach Wilson. But you're absolutely correct. I think that the Jets do believe that if Wilson takes the step that they hope he will, there's no reason they can't be playing competitive games in December. Now, it's stacked conference. They have a tough schedule. They're fighting from behind the 8 ball already because of that. But there's no reason that this Jets team can't win 7-8 games if Zach Wilson plays like a number 2 overall pick, and he plays the way that the Jets hope he will. I'm not saying he has to be an all-pro. I mean, he doesn't have to be Justin Herbert or whatever this year, but if he plays like a league average quarterback, then the Jets could realistically win 7-8 games. Absolutely.
Yes, I think for me, if you're a Jet fan and you can take 4 and 5 for the bye, you sign for it immediately, because that means you probably got all your winnable games and you stole one somewhere along the way.
Oh, for sure. If you're winning 4 or 5 games before the bye, then yeah, the Jets should be playing meaningful games in December.
Absolutely, Justin. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you go, I could be follow social media, keep up with some of your coverage over at the Jet Press.
Gotcha. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Fried, Fried, spelled like fried, pronounced like Fried. Also on Twitter at the Jet Press. And yeah, if you want to read some stuff, you can go to thejetpress.com and check me out there.
Absolutely. And for the fans who do not quite get the pronunciation, think of the Brave pitcher. It's the same pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly. I was very happy when the Braves drafted him and when he made it to the MLB, because I was like, yes, there's another one out there. Maybe people will get it now.
Yeah, well, I got it from that, Justin. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Mike.